In 2018, if you had walked into any Honda dealership, any Yamaha showroom, any Harley-Davidson flagship store in America, and told the people working there that within 7 years, Kawasaki would be the #1 selling motorcycle brand in the United States, they would have laughed at you. Honda was the king. Harley was an American institution. Yamaha had the R1 and the R6, two of the most iconic sport bikes ever built. And Kawasaki? Kawasaki was the green brand, the one your buddy with the stretched Ninja recommended on Reddit, the perennial 4th place finisher in the Japanese Big Four. And yet, by 2025, Kawasaki posted 17.7% sales growth in the first half of the year, while the overall United States motorcycle market shrank 9.2%. They went on to claim the #1 sales position in the country for the full year, dethroning Honda for the first time in modern history. Honda slipped to a close second after posting roughly a 12% decline. And according to multiple industry trackers, the Kawasaki Z650 was at or near the very top of United States model sales rankings, with the Ninja 500 right behind it. A pair of affordable Japanese twins that most people outside of motorcycling have never heard of. What nobody knew back in 2018 was that Kawasaki had already started building a playbook that none of these companies had an answer for. And by the time they noticed, it was too late to catch up. None of this means Kawasaki suddenly conquered the global motorcycle industry. Honda is still the worldwide giant by an enormous margin. But in the United States, Kawasaki found a market opening that several bigger brands either ignored or misread, and they ran with it. This is the story of how 4 motorcycle giants looked the other way, while the smallest company in the room quietly exploited a moment when its rivals were distracted, retreating, or misreading the market, and turned that opening into one of the strongest runs in the United States motorcycle business. It starts with a supercharger that came from outer space. Well, not literally, but close. In October 2014, Kawasaki began teasing a project that would change the trajectory of the company. They released a cryptic video showing a supercharger impeller spinning, lit by green lights, with no other information. The internet went wild. And when the Ninja H2R was finally unveiled at the 2014 Intermot show and went on sale in 2015, it lived up to every rumor. At a time when every other manufacturer was focused on naturally aspirated engines, electronics packages, and incremental horsepower gains, the H2R was none of those things. It was the first production motorcycle to use a supercharger since the failed turbo experiments of the early 1980s, and it produced 310 horsepower on a motorcycle. For context, that is more power than a Porsche 911 Carrera. The track-only H2R had a manufacturer's suggested retail price that eventually rose well above $55,000, and it was not designed to sell in volume. It was designed to send a message. The street-legal Ninja H2 followed with over 200 horsepower, and when the motorcycling press got their hands on it, the reviews were equal parts terrified and amazed. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The supercharger wasn't designed by Kawasaki's motorcycle division. It was built by engineers from Kawasaki Heavy Industries Aerospace Company, the same people who design turbine components for commercial jet engines. The impeller inside that supercharger spins at 130,000 revolutions per minute. It was CNC machined from forged aluminum. The mirror stays on the H2 were designed as airfoils by aerospace engineers. The system compresses air to 2.4 times atmospheric pressure so efficiently that no intercooler is needed, which is how they crammed a supercharger into a motorcycle frame without making the thing look like a parade float. And that created a problem for everyone else. Very few motorcycle manufacturers had anything like Kawasaki's in-house advantage here. The wider Kawasaki group already knew how to design high-speed rotating machinery, and they chose to use that advantage years before anyone else even tried. Honda makes cars, Yamaha makes pianos, Harley-Davidson makes, well, mostly leather goods at this point. Nobody moved on forced induction because nobody had the institutional knowledge to move first. Cycle World put it simply when they looked back nearly a decade later. They called the H2 a machine that stunned the motorcycling world by leveraging Kawasaki Heavy Industries' experience in turbine technology. And they were right. This wasn't a marketing gimmick. This was a technology moat. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool supercharger, but a $30,000 hyperbike doesn't sell in volume. And you'd be right. The H2 itself was never going to win a sales war. But Kawasaki did something smart with that platform. They spread it. In 2018, the H2 SX Sport Tourer arrived at around $19,000, a supercharged motorcycle you could actually ride to work. Then came the ZH2 Hyper Naked in 2020. Then Kawasaki licensed the engine to Bimota for the TC-H2 and the Terra. That one supercharger platform now powers 6 production motorcycles across 2 brands. The research and development cost got amortized across the entire lineup, and Kawasaki walked away with something money can't buy: permanent technological credibility. Meanwhile, Honda's response? In November 2025, Honda unveiled a V3 concept using an electronically controlled compressor at EICMA, more than a decade after Kawasaki put a production supercharged bike on the market. Think about that for a second. This decision to go all in on forced induction seemed small at the time. It wasn't. Because the supercharger was just the halo play. The real war was happening in the middle of the lineup, and Kawasaki was winning that one too. But we'll get to that in a moment, because first we need to talk about a corporate restructuring that changed everything. On October 1st, 2021, Kawasaki Heavy Industries did something drastic. They spun off the entire motorcycle and power sports business into a standalone company called Kawasaki Motors Limited. This wasn't a cosmetic rebrand. Kawasaki Heavy Industries explicitly stated that the motorcycle division was their only mass production consumer-facing business, and the spin-off would speed up decision-making. They were tired of their motorcycle engineers waiting for approval from shipbuilders and industrial robot managers. Hiroshi Ito, a Kawasaki Heavy Industries veteran since 1985, became the first president. The targets he set were aggressive. He wanted to more than double motorcycle and power sports revenue by 2030. He committed major manufacturing investment, including a factory costing $200 million in Mexico, announced in October 2023, specifically to strengthen North American production capacity. And he committed to making all main Kawasaki models in developed markets electric or hybrid by 2035. The financial results proved him right almost immediately. By fiscal year 2024, the Power Sports and Engine division generated 609 billion yen in revenue, with 47.8 billion yen in operating profit. North American motorcycle shipments hit 116,000 units, up over 23% from the prior year. The motorcycle division became Kawasaki Heavy Industries' most profitable business segment, generating more profit than any of the parent company's 4 other divisions. Kawasaki had unlocked a cheat code. They gave their motorcycle people the freedom to move fast. And while they were speeding up, everyone else was slowing down. Eigo Kanya, president of Kawasaki Motors USA, confirmed what the numbers already showed. He said the Kawasaki brand in North America is strong and getting stronger, and the key word in that sentence is brand. What Kawasaki was really building was not just a product line, it was a reputation with a very specific type of rider, the rider who wanted modern technology at fair prices, from a company that seemed to genuinely care about motorcycles rather than treating them as a line item in some industrial conglomerate's quarterly report. The clock was already ticking on the competition. They just could not hear it yet. Let's start with Honda, because this one genuinely hurts. Honda is the largest motorcycle manufacturer on Earth. They reported roughly 20.6 million motorcycle unit sales globally in fiscal year 2025. That is roughly 40% of the entire worldwide motorcycle market. That sounds dominant, and globally it is. But here is the catch. Roughly 85% of those sales come from Asian commuter markets, small displacement scooters and underbones in Vietnam, India, Indonesia, and Thailand. Japan, Europe, and the United States, the enthusiast markets where people buy sport bikes, adventure bikes, and middleweights, account for only about 6% of Honda's total volume. So when Honda's corporate leadership in Tokyo looked at their portfolio and decided where to allocate engineering resources, the CBR 600RR was not exactly a priority. And this is where the story gets almost absurd. Honda actually built an updated CBR 600RR around 2020 and 2021. The Japanese domestic model received a TFT display, a 6-axis IMU, multiple ride modes, cornering ABS, a quick shifter, and traction control. Genuinely modern electronics on one of the most beloved sport bike platforms in history. But North American Honda was painfully slow to bring it over. They continued selling the 2013-era model for years, while Kawasaki kept investing in the ZX6R. Only with the 2026 model year did Honda finally introduce a refreshed version to the US market. That means Kawasaki had the middleweight supersport class essentially to itself for the better part of half a decade. One motorcycle journalist summed it up perfectly. If you fail to update your product while every manufacturer around you does, of course your sales will fall. You cannot blame that on some made-up trope about the sport bike market being dead in America. And that is not a typo. Honda chose to sell a decade-old motorcycle in a market where Kawasaki was outselling them with newer, cheaper, better-equipped alternatives. Honda has announced plans for 30 electric motorcycle models by 2030, but the vast majority target Asian commuter markets. The motorcycle division that built this company is essentially running on autopilot in the markets where passion sells bikes. Now, Yamaha made a different choice. If Honda's failure was neglect, Yamaha's was a calculated retreat. The iconic YZF R6 was discontinued as a street bike after 2020. Yamaha said this was due to evolving global market trends and emissions regulations that limited production volumes. The R1, arguably the most celebrated superbike nameplate of the 2000s, became track-only in Europe starting in 2025, following the exact same path. In their place, Yamaha launched the R7 in 2022. It used a 689 cubic centimeter parallel twin derived from the MT-07 engine, producing 73.4 horsepower. The R6 made 120 horsepower. Online motorcycle forums treated this like a funeral. But here's the thing about Yamaha's strategy that nobody wanted to admit: the R7 worked. It became Yamaha's best-selling motorcycle in the United States. Turns out, most people buying a sport bike in 2023 are not tracking it at Laguna Seca. They want something that looks sharp, rides well, and does not cost $18,000. Yamaha's real bet was the MT series, the Masters of Torque naked bike lineup. The MT-07 alone has sold 160,000 units globally, with 27% of buyers being first-time riders. The company went all in on accessible performance over raw track weaponry. The logic made sense on paper. But by retreating from the supersport ladder, Yamaha gave up the aspirational products that bring young riders into dealerships in the first place. The kid who posts a Yamaha R6 as his phone wallpaper is the same kid who buys an MT-07 as his first bike. Take away the R6, and the MT-07 is just another commuter. Kawasaki understood this. Their ZX lineup kept the dream alive, and the Z and Ninja entry bikes caught the new riders who walked in to look at the poster. And to be fair, the Yamaha R9 that launched in March 2025 at $12,499 is a legitimate competitor. It uses an 890 cubic centimeter inline triple derived from the MT-09 platform. It even won in its World Supersport Racing debut. But by the time Yamaha launched the R9, Kawasaki had already filled the vacuum with an unbroken supersport ladder. The ZX4R at 400 cubic centimeters, the ZX6R at 636 cubic centimeters, the ZX10R at a full liter. Kawasaki did not just survive the sport bike decline narrative. They stayed in the room when everyone else walked out, and then the room filled back up. According to MIC reported 2025 category data, mid-size sport bike sales in the United States showed notable resilience, with the growth concentrated in models under 750 cubic centimeters. The segment everyone left for dead was growing, and Kawasaki was the only brand with a full lineup ready to catch it. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. We cover motorcycle industry stories like this every week, and there is a lot more coming. While all of this was happening in the Japanese Big Four, an entirely different disaster was unfolding in Milwaukee, and it makes everything else look small. Harley-Davidson's Livewire electric motorcycle launched in September 2019 at $29,799. It was supposed to be future-proof. It was supposed to attract younger riders. It was supposed to prove that Harley could innovate beyond chrome and leather. Harley spun Livewire into a separate publicly traded company through a special purpose acquisition company merger in September 2022, valued at approximately $1.77 billion. It went badly from the start. The deal raised far less than planned. Investors pulled their money almost immediately. The stock dropped over 30% in its first month, and Harley had to inject another $100 million just to keep it afloat. And the sales numbers? The sales numbers are the kind that make accountants cry. LiveWire sold 660 units in all of 2023, then 612 units in all of 2024. The first quarter of 2025 was even worse, with just 33 units shipped before a late-year rebound brought the full-year 2025 total to 653 motorcycles. Let me put those numbers in perspective. There are individual Kawasaki dealerships in Texas that sell more motorcycles in a quarter than LiveWire sold nationwide in most quarters. An entire brand backed by one of the most recognizable names in American manufacturing, selling in the hundreds per year. LiveWire's original projection was over 100,000 bikes per year by 2026. In 2023, the brand reported a net loss of $109.6 million. In 2024, it was $93.9 million on just $26.6 million in revenue. And roughly 85% of that revenue came from Stacy C. Children's electric balance bikes, not actual motorcycles. However you slice the math on losses versus units shipped, LiveWire was burning through enormous amounts of money on almost no motorcycle sales volume. And no, I'm not making that up. Underneath the LiveWire disaster, Harley faces a structural demographic crisis that no single product can fix. Analysts and company-adjacent data both point to a core buyer well into the 50s, significantly older than what a growth brand would want. And the trend line is brutal. U.S. domestic Harley sales have dropped from over 260,000 units in 2006 to roughly 102,000 in North America in 2024, a decline exceeding 53% over 2 decades. Full-year 2025 revenue fell to $4.47 billion, down 14% from 2024, which was already down 11% from 2023. 2 consecutive years of double-digit revenue decline. CEO Jochen Zeitz departed. Activist investor H Partners, holding roughly 9.1% of shares, launched a proxy campaign called Free the Eagle that lost by only 3 percentage points. New CEO Artie Starrs, formerly of Topgolf and Pizza Hut, took over in October 2025, and then tariffs hit. Harley reported $67 million in tariff-related costs for 2025 and warned that tariff pressure could remain significant into 2026. The EU retaliatory tariffs have also specifically targeted Harley-Davidson, making Europe, their second-largest market, increasingly hostile territory. Meanwhile, Japanese manufacturers with factories spread across Thailand, Indonesia, India, and the Philippines face significantly less tariff exposure because their supply chains were already global, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave of Harley to try the electric pivot or incredibly tone-deaf to what their actual customers wanted, probably both. Now, Kawasaki's competition wasn't just fumbling in boardrooms. One of them straight up quit. In May 2022, Suzuki's corporate headquarters in Japan informed its MotoGP racing team that they were pulling out of the championship at the end of the season. The team staff was blindsided. Rider Alex Rins reportedly broke down in tears. And this was only 2 years after Joan Mir had won the 2020 MotoGP World Championship on a Suzuki GSX-RR, arguably the most competitive bike on the grid at the time. But Suzuki didn't stop at MotoGP. They simultaneously withdrew from the FIM Endurance World Championship, where their Yoshimura CERT team was the reigning champion. This completed a systematic retreat from every major international racing series. Suzuki had already pulled factory support from World Superbike in 2015 and MXGP in 2017. From 2023 onward, Suzuki no longer had the kind of top-tier factory racing presence that had once anchored its performance image. Former Suzuki team manager Paul Denning warned publicly about what this would mean. He said the desirability of Suzuki would continue to decrease and called it a very short-term approach by senior management. And he was right. When Suzuki left the track, they didn't just lose races. They lost the marketing engine that gives young riders a reason to choose your brand over someone else's. They lost relevance. The product lineup backed up his fears. The GSX R1000 hadn't been significantly updated since 2017 and was discontinued in Europe and Japan because it couldn't meet Euro 5 emissions. The GSX R750 was unchanged since 2011. The DRZ400 went 25 years without a meaningful revision. While Kawasaki was launching the ZX4R and the Ninja 7 Hybrid, Suzuki's showroom sat frozen in time like a museum exhibit. Pay attention to this next part, because it explains everything about how Kawasaki actually won the sales war. It wasn't the H2, it wasn't the Hybrid, it was the bikes nobody writes magazine covers about. By 2024, multiple industry trackers were ranking the Kawasaki Z650 at or near the very top of United States model sales across all brands. And it starts at just $7,249 for the 2026 model year. Think about what that means. In a country where Harley-Davidson built its entire identity around being America's motorcycle brand, the bike that more Americans were buying than almost any other was a Japanese parallel twin from Kawasaki. That is not a market correction, that is a tectonic shift. The Ninja 500 was the second most sold bike in the United States in 2025, starting at $5,399. These are not exotic machines. They are reliable, well-featured 450 to 650 cubic centimeters twins, with TFT displays, smartphone connectivity through the Rideology app, LED lighting, and smooth parallel twin engines. They come at prices $3,000 to $15,000 below entry-level Harley-Davidsons. And that price gap is doing enormous work. Because when a 25-year-old walks into a dealership with a pre-approved loan, the difference between $5,400 and $12,000 is not just a number, it is the difference between riding home today and thinking about it for another year. The ZX4R, launched in 2023, filled a gap nobody else even attempted. It has a 399 cubic centimeters inline-4 engine, producing 76.4 horsepower, with a red line that screams past 15,000 revolutions per minute. It is the only modern 400 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder sport bike available in Western markets, a spiritual successor to the legendary ZXR 400 that disappeared 30 years ago. Priced between $9,399 and $9,999. Depending on trim, it targets the enthusiast who grew up on the Japanese 400 cubic centimeter wars of the 1980s and 1990s, while simultaneously attracting younger riders stepping up from 300 cubic centimeter twins. Cycle World called it a dream come true, and nobody else even tried. The ZX6R tells an equally important story. While Yamaha killed the R6, Suzuki dropped the GSX R600, and Honda left the CBR600RR frozen in 2013, Kawasaki kept the Ninja ZX6R alive as the last inline 4 600 cubic centimeter supersport in continuous production. The 636 cubic centimeter displacement gives it a measurable torque advantage over strict 599 cubic centimeter rivals in real-world riding. Kawasaki also keeps investing in it, with a fully updated 2024 model and a redesigned 2027 version already revealed, at a time when every competitor treated the 600 cubic centimeter class as a dying segment not worth saving. As one motorcycle journalist put it, as its competitors in the 600 cubic centimeter sport bike class stagnated and slowly died off, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX6R remained a constant. Kawasaki did not just survive the sport bike obituary, they wrote the comeback story. And then Kawasaki made another move that nobody saw coming. They went hybrid before anyone was ready. The Ninja 7 Hybrid launched in 2024 at $12,499 as the world's first mass-production strong hybrid motorcycle. It combines a 451 cubic centimeter parallel twin that makes 58 horsepower on its own, boosted to 68.5 horsepower with the electric motor, alongside a 9-kilowatt electric motor and a 48-volt lithium-ion battery that charges while riding. It has an electronically controlled 6-speed transmission with no clutch lever, and you can ride it in automatic or in manual button shift mode. It offers 3 riding modes: Sport Hybrid, Eco Hybrid, and Pure Electric for low-speed riding around parking lots and neighborhoods. And the comparison that matters? One review from Jalopnik nailed it. They wrote that if Kawasaki keeps pressing on with hybrid bike tech, it could have a hit on its hands in 1 or 2 generations. They pointed out that the first Toyota Prius was also a compromise, and look where that went. On the pure electric side, the Ninja E1 at $7,599 and the ZE1 at $7,299 are entry-level urban electrics with modest specs. They offer 9-kilowatt peak power, about 41 miles of range, and a top speed around 51 to 62 miles per hour. They are not going to replace anyone's track day bike, but they are on the market at accessible prices, building dealer experience with electric vehicle service and costing roughly 1/3 of a live wire. Kawasaki is also exploring hydrogen fuel cell concepts and participates in the swappable battery consortium with Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki for standardized interchangeable batteries. Their hedging strategy covers internal combustion, hybrid, battery electric, and hydrogen. They are treating the future powertrain as uncertain and positioning across every possible outcome. That is not flashy, that is smart. And underneath all of these product decisions, there is a demographic story that explains why Kawasaki's lineup was perfectly timed. Industry survey data has tracked US motorcycle ownership aging dramatically over the last few decades, rising from the mid-20s in the 1980s to around 47 to 50 in more recent snapshots. Women now represent 19% of all motorcycle owners, and they are the fastest growing demographic in the sport. Younger riders show enormous interest in motorcycles. The demand is there, but they face severe affordability barriers. New bike affordability has worsened sharply since 2020, with higher manufacturer-suggested retail prices, financing costs, and insurance all raising the barrier for younger buyers. A $15,000 motorcycle easily turns into $20,000 or more in first-year ownership costs. The biggest obstacle is not a lack of interest. It is generational income inequality and the rising cost of ownership. And here is exactly where Kawasaki mapped its entire product strategy. A Ninja 500 priced at $5,399 or a Z400 at $5,399 offers a genuine, modern, well-built motorcycle at roughly half the price of an entry-level Harley. The Z650 at $7,249 delivers class-leading middleweight performance. MIC director Buckner Nesheim confirmed what the data was already screaming. Customers are moving towards smaller, affordable, versatile, and performance-focused models, while sales in traditional large displacement segments like touring and cruisers continue to decline. The COVID-19 pandemic actually supercharged this trend. US motorcycle sales surged over 20% between 2019 and 2021 as first-time riders flooded the market. When those buyers came back for their second or third bike in 2023 and 2024, Kawasaki's middleweight lineup was perfectly positioned to catch them. As the post-pandemic correction deepened, US motorcycle sales fell between 5 and 8% in 2025, depending on the reporting body. Honda and Harley absorbed disproportionate declines. Kawasaki's affordable, high-value middleweight range held strong. When money gets tight, value wins. Kawasaki was not just present for this shift, they anticipated it. Every competitor was caught leaning in the wrong direction. So what are those competitors doing now that they have been caught off guard? The reactions range from promising to puzzling to borderline panicked. Honda unveiled an electronically controlled compressor concept at EICMA in November 2025, but that technology is still years from production. They did finally bring an updated CBR 600RR to the US market for the 2026 model year, closing a gap that Kawasaki exploited for half a decade. But Honda's global electric motorcycle push still targets Asian commuter markets, not Western enthusiasts. Honda has started responding, but they gave Kawasaki years of near-total dominance in the middleweight performance space. Yamaha launched the R9 in 2025, and it is a legitimately good motorcycle. It even won on its World Supersport Racing debut. Yamaha leadership at EICMA 2025 hinted at up to 10 new models and a possible road-legal R1 return. But their European president admitted that just bringing back the current R1 with updated emissions compliance is not enough, that they need something genuinely new. That is a company admitting out loud that they let a decade of supersport development atrophy. The wake-up call was loud. Whether they are fast enough is another question entirely. Suzuki has shown signs of life. They developed a new 776 cubic centimeter parallel twin platform, spawning the GSX-8R, GSX-8S, and new retro models for 2026. The legendary DRZ was finally updated as the DRZ4S for 2025, its first meaningful revision in 25 years. And Suzuki announced the GSX R1000 returns for 2027 as a 40th anniversary model with an updated engine, new Bosch YMU, and Euro 5 compliance. But whether this is a real comeback or a nostalgic gesture, nobody knows yet. Suzuki has years of trust and credibility to rebuild after walking away from racing and letting their showroom gather dust. And Harley? Harley hired a new CEO from Topgolf and Pizza Hut. His most concrete initiative is the Harley-Davidson Sprint, a roughly $6,000 entry-level motorcycle targeting new riders, expected in 2026. If Harley had launched that bike 5 years ago, this might be a different video. Instead, they are playing catch-up in a market that Kawasaki's Ninja 500 already owns, at $5,399. And that brings us to the real takeaway of this entire story. Kawasaki's advantage was never resources. Honda's motorcycle revenue alone is roughly 6 times larger than Kawasaki's. It was not luck, and it was not one single product. It was focus. The October 2021 spin-off freed the motorcycle business from a heavy industry parent, allowing faster decisions. The supercharged H2 platform established technological credibility no competitor could replicate. The middleweight lineup captured the exact demographic sweet spot of affordability and modern features, and Kawasaki refused to abandon segments that everyone else declared dead, only to watch those segments come back to life. Honda had an updated CBR 600RR and took years to sell it in the biggest enthusiast market on the planet. Yamaha systematically retreated from the classic supersport formula. Harley burned somewhere north of $300 million on Livewire while selling fewer motorcycles than some regional Kawasaki dealers move in a year. Suzuki walked away from MotoGP with a championship-winning bike and let their entire product line stagnate. Each of those decisions made sense inside its own corporate bubble. But collectively, they created a vacuum that only one company was positioned to fill, and that is the part that should make every brand executive in the motorcycle industry uncomfortable. Kawasaki did not do anything revolutionary. They kept building sport bikes when everyone else stopped. They priced their middleweights for the riders who actually exist. They restructured their company to move faster, and they invested in the future without burning the present to the ground. They were methodical, not flashy. The real question is not whether Kawasaki can hold this position. The real question is whether the competition can afford the years it will take to close the gap. Because supercharged technology moats, hybrid electric firsts, an unbroken sport bike lineup, and a decade of credibility with younger riders do not get copied in a quarterly earnings cycle. Every other brand was looking the other way. Kawasaki was executing a plan that nobody took seriously until it was too late.